Hello again and welcome back. Alright, in this lesson we're going to talk a little bit about soft proofing. Soft proofing is nothing more than previewing the image before it's printed. Kind of a way to do a test print without actually printing. To go about doing a soft proof, we're going to run up here to this little view box, click on it, and then run down to proof setup. In here we can go into custom or working CMYK. Typically CMYK, that's for offset printers. That's when you're going to be printing something like a book or a high volume of posters on an offset printing machine. For most of us, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be printing either wet chemistry photographs in a lab or inkjet prints somewhere at home or in a lab. So typically for our purposes, we're going to run in here to custom and click custom, and we get this dialog box that pops up. And right down here, we click on here, we can go in and find the profile of the paper and device that we're going to be using. I do an awful lot of my printing with the slide printer, now called Denver Digital Imaging, and I've got their two papers right here, and depending upon which paper I'm going to print on, I can throw their profiles in. So let's pretend I'm going to do their matte finish, let's say. Let's click on it. Now we have this Fuji Super C matte profile in here, and now right here in Photoshop I can do some soft proofing and see what it's going to look like printed on that paper. We'll just toggle this on and off, and you can see the effects change. In addition, we can also come down here and click on this simulate paper color. We'll click on that, and now it's adjusting for the fact that we're not looking at emitted light but reflected light off of a paper. Now we can toggle everything on and off. So you might be wondering, where did I grab this Fuji Super C matte profile from? Actually got it off of the website of the lab that I work with. And often on a website of the lab you're working with, they'll have the profiles for the paper and machines, and they'll also have instructions on where to load that profile in your system. So what is it that I'm actually thinking about when I'm toggling this little preview on and off? I'm actually trying to make a decision as to how this should be printed. This right here, this is set up for wet chemistry. And often wet chemistry photographs have a real hard time with certain yellows, oranges in particular, and reds. Those real fluorescent colors we're able to capture these days. Often wet chemistry photography does not reproduce that well. And if I'm checking an image over and I'm seeing a real problem in those areas, that just tells me that I really want to print this as an inkjet. Inkjets now have an amazing wide variety of fluorescent colors that they have to work with, and those make a tremendous difference. You can get some very, very nice, realistic looking reproductions with inkjets that you can't get with wet chemistry. Okay, a little bit more on this particular dialog box. Typically, the rendering intent, I've never seen anybody use anything but this relative color metric, and then you do want to have this black point compression checked on. Okay, so let's go ahead and click OK here. Notice now we're previewing this before print. This is not what we normally see. If we want to see what we normally see, we can just uncheck proof colors. Here's our normal arrangement. We can always go back in now and proof colors, and we're seeing the way it's going to print on that particular paper. Now some people like to run back in, click on view, then run down and look at gamut warnings. And a gamut is basically the reproducible range of color. So what we're saying here is that with this particular profile and machine, paper profile and machine, we are not going to be able to reproduce this range of colors that you see when you're viewing it like this. what you're actually going to get is something that looks more like that. Notice this area here drops off, and if we choose the Gamut Warnings, it shows us the area where it drops off. At this point in time, I usually make the decision to go ahead and print something like this with an inkjet. The inkjets with their fluorescent colors reproduce this very nicely. Having said that, other people want to go in and fiddle with things. What they might be doing, I'll show you, although it's not part of my normal workflow. They might come down here and choose a hue and saturation adjustment layer. Go ahead and select any particular color. We've seen this before. Mash the sliders together. Choose the sampler tool here. Come out and take a sample. Choose the eyedropper with the plus sign to add to that sample. Opening that up just a little bit, maybe even going to point sample. And then they might use either the hue slider, I'll put that back now to 0, or the saturation slider to move things around until all the colors are in gamut. Again, I don't do this, but some people find it useful to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this layer away and just reiterate that what I do is if I see this much of my image is having a problem with colors, I usually just decide to print it as an inkjet, and that'll usually give me the very nicest reproduction. This brings us to the end of our soft proofing discussion. There is one last thing that we have not talked about that you may be wondering about. And we know this little asterisk right here next to the 8 means we are not, our color space profile of the image does not match the working space. But what does this little asterisk here mean? It just means that you've made changes since you've last saved the image, and if you save it, click File, Save, that asterisk goes away. Alright, this is the end of it. I hope you have found these helpful.